Good evening, listeners, brave navigators of the enigmatic and the concealed. Have you ever felt the pull of the unanswered, the allure of the mysteries that shroud our existence? For more than a decade, a unique comic publisher has dared to dive into these mysteries, unafraid of the secrets they might uncover. This audacious entity is Paranoid American. Welcome to the mystifying universe of the Paranoid American podcast.
Launched in the year 2012, Paranoid American has been on a mission to decipher the encrypted secrets of our world. From the unnerving enigma of MK Ultra mind control to the clandestine assemblies of secret societies. From the awe-inspiring frontiers of forbidden technology to the arcane patterns of occult symbols in our very own pop culture. They have committed to unveiling the concealed realities that lie just beneath the surface. Join us as we navigate these intricate landscapes, decoding the hidden scripts of our society and challenging the accepted perceptions of reality.
Folks, I've got a big problem on my hands. There's a company called Paranoid American making all these funny memes and comics. Now, I'm a fair guy. I believe in free speech as long as it doesn't cross the line. And if these AI-generated memes dare to make fun of me, they're crossing the line.
This is your expedition into the realm of the extraordinary, the secret, the shrouded. Come with us as we sift through the world's grand mysteries, question the standardized narratives, and brave the cryptic labyrinth of the concealed truth. So strap yourselves in, broaden your horizons, and steel yourselves for a voyage into the enigmatic heart of the Paranoid American podcast, where each story, every image, every revelation brings us one step closer to the elusive truth.
Another episode in. We're not going to waste any time at all, and I'm going to immediately welcome our guest, Monica Perez from Monica Deep Dives. How you doing, Monica?
Hello. Thanks for having me. That was an awesome intro.
I appreciate. I joke, but I'm half serious. Part of this show is just forcing people to watch the 2 minutes and then just get
It's
compliments.
awesome. And I was thinking, like, a lot of stuff I'm not totally like Bigfoot and whatever, I don't know, but basically everything in your intro, I'm like, right, definitely. Let's talk about it.
I'm glad. Well, that's exactly what we're here to talk about. So before we get in too deep and go on a million different tangents, MonicaDeepDives.com is where people can find you. But what else is going on with Monica Perez? What other websites or books or projects do they look at?
Yeah, you can get all the stuff that I do on Deep Dives with Monica Perez on your favorite podcasting platform, but have rockfin.com/deep dives. But if you go to the website, you can separate it out by what it is. So I do just deep dives proper, which is like 45 minutes on one subject. And then I also do a bunch of interviews, dive master interviews and buddy dives like this one. And so I would say go to Monica's Deep Dives. I have newsletters that does everything from the month, so you can just find stuff easily. So I put a lot of work in the research, so I want people to be able to identify what topic they want to talk about, FTX or 15-minute cities or whatever.
And speaking of research, just for the record, I don't think that's a green screen behind you. That is a literal ton of books.
Yes. And I know it looks douchey, but I need them. Like, I need to have access to them. And that's just like a very small, so I have like thousands of books. And it's amazing like how helpful it is. When I had them all in boxes before I moved, it sucked because these are resources. And I only did it because a friend of mine was just like, they're gonna burn all the books. And I was like, shit, I better collect the books. She's like, I'll bring my cow to your tunnel if I can use your library. And I'm like, okay. And I'm going to be the librarian of the tunnel. So I'm doing it. I'm doing this as a service to us truth seekers for posterity.
I mean, actually, that kind of shortcuts right to a question that I had in mind. But like, what do you think? I think I know what you think about physical media. But what do you think about digital media? So like, there's two different kinds too. So let me specify. Let's not talk about like the Kindle version that keeps itself downloaded, and if they erase a naughty word, then your version gets the naughty word. What about just having like PDF versions of all the books behind you? Is that insufficient, you think?
Oh, I think if you've got it on a thumb drive, I mean, I don't know what like an EMP does or whatever, like an electromagnetic pulse would do to a thumb drive. I don't know about that. Yeah, I mean, people feel like like the best minds think that Bitcoin is going to survive on your thumb or whatever, right? Like, isn't that the thing? Like, people bet millions of dollars that thumb drives will last. The
Everyone
apocalypse,
has a god.
I guess. Yes, right. So for me, I mean, I worry about paper. Like the quality of the paper has gone down. It won't last forever. I worry about having a Chinese English dictionary so that people can still read those things in 100 years.
That's
I
funny.
was a big fan of Firefly, like that TV show Serenity,
Mhm.
whatever,
Yeah,
where
R.I.P.
yeah, I know for sure, but they didn't speak Spanglish, they spoke like Chinglish or whatever, and I thought that's you're gonna I don't know if English is gonna be the dominant language in the very, very future, but I feel like I like the ideology of liberty, and I have all those books, like so many. That is a criticism that my friend Anthony Raimondo says, like libertarians just have a fetish for books and don't do anything. So he's right about me. But anyway, I feel like I'm contributing. But yeah, I don't the digital stuff. I mean, it not only can be erased, it can be manipulated. It can be wronged, it can be distorted.
On you were making jokes about Spanglish and Chinese English, and what about Esperanto? Why didn't Esperanto catch on if that's the case?
Why didn't it catch on? I don't know. Didn't they try to do like Ebonics too? I mean, maybe there is something that cannot be forced down from the top. Maybe language does have. I mean, Noam Chomsky was his claim to fame. I think it was totally discredited, but he did think you had like a template of knowledge of language in your brain when you were born. I think that's absolutely not true. But
Is there
maybe it's organic.
is there anyone known Chomsky's age that has sort of like stood the test of time?
Let's think about that. John Coleman might have, and he so John Coleman's the one who does he wrote a few things, but he wrote the Committee of 300, which
Okay.
is there are 3,000 people basically in the Council of Foreign Relations, but there are 300 people who really know what's going on. But he wrote that book, and I read it a long time ago, and it was like right in every respect except for three things were not true. And since that time, those things did come true. So I'm like, wow, that guy was on it. But then he started doing a newsletter, and I really feel like he was like in Star Trek where that guy was on drugs and they made him be a like a Hitler or whatever. So I feel like John Coleman had nothing to do with the newsletter that was printed in his name, and he was getting old, so I feel like that looked like it was discrediting him, but I think that he himself was still legit, and, who else? The great John Taylor Gatto, he died, but I think he was legit throughout. I've spoken to G. Edward Griffin, and, he seemed legit.
Creature from Jekyll Island, right?
Yes. Yes.
I think
So
that might be the book that converted me,
yeah.
like, economically slash politically in some ways. Like, and it's a weird thing to say because it's such a financial book, but that was the first time that it finally clicked for me, and I couldn't even paraphrase it, repeat it now. But it was basically this is how charities and philanthropies and things work to make it look like it's good, but it's actually not good. Like I finally get it now,
Yeah,
and the
there
loans
was a
to foreign
conspiracy.
nations.
But here's the only thing I would say about him without disrespect, but Eustace Mullins was the one who revealed, and his book was called The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. He was commissioned by Ezra Pound, who was committed to an insane asylum instead of going to jail for being a like card carrying Mussolini fascist. So it has a deeper history than even you might think, and that's the only thing I would say is that I feel like you gotta give Eustace Mullins the hat tip, and I don't hear that too much.
The enemy of my enemy, in a way, maybe.
I don't know. No, I mean, I think Eustace Mullins was saying the same things that, Griffin ended up saying, but I didn't the Ezra Pound connection is weird because I mean, like you want to say like he was being persecuted for politics, and he was. I mean, obviously, but his politics were really kind of crazy. And but his writing, like he was such a talented writer that if you actually read his stuff, there's one thing he wanted to do is super nerdy, but I think he was just like a poet or whatever. But he wanted to separate, and I think Hitler did this. He was like, thought it was great. He wanted to separate the medium of exchange from the store of value function of money. So like money should expire, which I think
Hmm.
it might. Like I think if you go to digital currency, they might actually do that. They will have the power to do that. Like just put
Right.
a timestamp on your money.
I guess that it kind of does in a slight way because of inflation. I guess what he's
Yes.
suggesting is to combat that, to make people constantly spend money and not just hoard it. So, like, if you hoard it, it
Yes.
just loses its value, I guess.
Yeah, you would have to like buy actual gold or whatever. But I was reading an IMF International Monetary Fund blog article that said the way we're gonna this was from years ago, the way we're gonna make digital currency is we're gonna make the exchange rate like change over time. So day one, you could exchange your greenbacks for one greenback for one digidollar. But at the
Mhm.
end of the first year, you'll have to give a dollar and a dime to get a digidollar. So
Right.
they're
Well, what
actually
do they call it?
planning an
Dutch
exchange.
auction is where, like, the first ones are cheaper, and then the more you
Yeah,
sell, the higher the
yeah,
price goes.
yeah. So that's what they're planning to do. And of course, they'll do what they want. But I mean, I
What are your
wonder
thoughts
sometimes.
on that? On just digital currency in general, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and
Well, I'm such an idiot. I hate this when like I kind of have my opinion and I don't recognize that it's kind of like a false flag. Just because it's a false flag doesn't mean nobody died. So, right, like with Bitcoin, I mean, I remember it from like I feel like decades ago. I feel like I remember hearing
well,
about
it
it
was
for the
big with,
first.
like, libertarians, so yeah.
Yeah, and I think I was still a banker when, and that was basically before I had kids. So really long time ago, if I'm correct about that. And I just remember thinking, like, what's wrong with you people? It's a stepping stone to a cashless society. Like, that's what they're after. Like, don't you want to get your drugs and get, pay your babysitter cash? Like, what's wrong with you? So instead of being like, it's inevitable, I kind of was like, yeah, whatever. But I'd be super mega millionaire if I was smarter than that, but I was not. But I did see what it was for what it was, which is a stepping stone to a cashless society. And even some of the advocates for it know that it has kind of a sketchy origin story, but it doesn't mean that it isn't going to be the basis of the central bank digital currencies, that it isn't going to have to cooperate, it isn't going to be the gold.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the sketchy background, like, still nobody necessarily knows who made it. Satoshi is like this mystical character. Is he even real? Is he the CIA? Is he like some
Yeah. And
Yakuza shaman
I think
wizard?
someone was telling me, Tim Piccio, the libertarian, like the financial libertarian guy. I always get his name wrong. Picciot, I think it is. And he was saying that you can basically, I mean, there is evidence that it was a Rothschild operation, but I don't know. I didn't really look into it. I didn't really ever care because I was just like, yes, this is definitely a stepping stone to a cashless society. And that is, not what I want. I don't want that. I understand that you're telling me that it'll survive, whatever. You're fleeing the country. You don't have to like carry a satchel of gold, but I just don't like being every move is traced and they could just make things illegal. I mean, just waiting for them to charge double for every, second and third and fourth ice cream that you have in a week. Like I mean, the control is going to be total.
Yeah, the permanent ledger where anyone can see like what you've spent
Oh my
money on
gosh.
and where it came from, and
When I realized that, I was like, "Wait, what?" Like, this is the anonymous thing that I had to, like, take a picture of my driver's license to get, but I realized that's my bad, like, I used just a Coinbase wallet, I really probably shouldn't have done that, but I'm just fucking, dumb
well,
girl, like, I
the
don't.
trick there is that when you actually go to express whatever you've got on that thumb drive or in your memory, like at the point when you actually want to spend the money on the car or the house or like whatever it is, it kind of has to be traced back to you unless you jump through some really shadowy sort of hoops where the legality you might need to get like consulted on and stuff. So like
And then, like, this is where like, conceptually start mm, struggling is that so every single transaction is in the blockchain for every Bitcoin and they can diverge, right? Did you ever hear that? Like,
Yeah, well, that's not ideal, and usually a diverging
right.
is when there's, like, a disagreement somewhere, it's just like any like a municipality or like a town, it's like it gets too big and 2 competing factions, one says it should work this way, another says it should work this
Yeah.
way. Yeah, it happens constantly, although
So
you could and Bitcoin has happened with too, there's BTC and BT something else,
yeah,
BT
so
Classic.
so does that mean that the total is not fixed? Because I also want to mention something about that, like crypto generally. But first, I have to answer this question. So does that mean that whatever it is, what is it, 80 million or billion or whatever? They're
Yeah,
supposed to be
there's a set amount for Bitcoin in particular, not all of them
no,
necessarily
right,
have that,
just
but most
Bitcoin.
do.
But even Bitcoin, if it can split, that could really change that fixed number or not.
Well, it's
Can you
happened
answer?
already where and
Right.
usually what happens is that at that split, you technically now have the same that you had, but in 2 different branches. So for some people, it's almost like when a stock splits, you get both, right? You get the dividends of both of those. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that messes up the whole this is a fixed amount. And here's the other thing. So I was trying to I just wanted to decide whether to buy some or not. And I wanted to figure out how to value it. Is this price high? It was like $80,000 and then it was $30,000. And I was like, is this price high or 3,000? I don't even know what the right numbers are, but it was like big numbers and then smaller big numbers. And I just like, when is it a good deal? So I thought, okay, let's just take it from an industry point of view. Like, what is the total demand for currency? And I'm going to say it's $100 trillion. Let's say it's $100 trillion. Right, so, like, what's
Sure.
our economy, like, 20 trillion, maybe? I don't know, last time I looked, it was a long time ago. Let's say it's 20 trillion, I'm just
Half of
talking
our
big
debt,
numbers,
yeah.
and we're, like, 25% of the world. So let's just say it's $100 trillion. Okay, that's the demand for currency. What is the supply for currency? And let's say it's all crypto. What's the supply? What's the total supply of currency?
Well, it can keep being divided in
Yeah,
smaller amounts,
well, that's
much
the
smaller
Bitcoin
than
thing,
like a dollar into pennies,
but,
into
like, ETH could be lots, like, it could be and then there could be, like, another one. So,
right,
there could be competition among the current so unless it's actually
right.
just Bitcoin and it's just that fixed number, you have absolutely no idea what the supply is. So, you can't value it right now.
Well, or maybe ever just because of how murky it is, but like
Well, when
where Bitcoin
CBDC
goes, that's kind of what drives the rest of it. So if Bitcoin were to completely
right,
crap the bed, like it doesn't mean everything else does instantly, but it sure as heck means that the rest
okay.
of the landscape kind of starts sliding.
So, I guess I would think in the million possible, trillion, billion possible paths that this thing could take, I'm gonna say one path that has a greater than 1 in a trillion chance of happening, so not just equal, like a little bit of a higher chance of happening, is that Bitcoin becomes the foundation of the CBDCs, and then other crypto are either regulated to the point where the quantity is limited or they're just regulated out of existence. But you will have a defined supply at some point and then the price won't fluctuate anymore. But that will happen because it's been taken over by the worldwide feds, and I feel like the FTX thing is what you know they're sparking that. Like I think that thing is totally created because the Bankmans. I did like a few shows on this because I went to Stanford Law School where those people were professors. And they were very nice, actually. And they have, like, this ethical system and I don't know, whatever, but they're really good friends. The dad is really good friends with, 1 or 2 former SEC chair men who were teachers there. I remember I had one of them. I forget which one it was, but I had one of the SEC chairman as a teacher for something.
Isn't
And
that
then
part of the reason you go there?
yeah, it's like all the mucty mucks. Yeah, for sure. So that Caroline Ellison, I think her dad like was an SEC chair or like is also has the same thing where like they're connected to these SEC chair who are I don't have my notes in front of me or I tell you the actual names and what they said and all that kind of stuff, but their goals have been to regulate crypto. These SEC guys who are in with the Ellisons and the Bankmans, and the Bankmans like ethical thing is pretty consistently. I don't care if people think I'm the bad guy. I want to make an impact. Like I'm above it all. So like when the kid says, if I could press a button and it's a 50-50 chance of blowing the world up or making the world way better, I'm pressing the button. Like they give hints to their, extreme view on ethics. So I just feel like this thing, my husband totally argues with me. He's like, no way, they're after that kid. I'm like, they might be after him, but if it's like Manafort or Flynn or Roger Stone or any of these guys who like go to jail and then they get out, or what's his face, Epstein, which whatever the kill himself thing. But before that, he was in jail, like literally had a back door. I think they built his cell for him with a back door when he was in jail. The guy, the whistleblower went to jail for longer than Epstein went to jail.
Yeah, then you have to just like check in like it was like a parole officer or something. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
I don't. He probably didn't even show up at all. So I'm just
yeah.
saying, like, you can tell me people are going to jail, but unless I actually, whatever, like, see their teeth falling out of their heads, I'm not going to believe that. So I just feel like the whole thing is a setup, and it's heading down the road of that kind of regulatory thing. And I feel like they'll probably use Bitcoin as a basis for it, but I mean, until there's some way to define the supply, I can't value it. Which,
I think that
I should have seen it coming. I'm not saying I was right because I don't have any.
well, I remember having someone, it was like $9, and I just thought it was
Wow.
like, why do these guys need me? Because it was way that you would do business on certain things, but and it was like, why would you want me to convert real money into fake money just so that you can convert the fake money back into real money? Like I just didn't understand it at the time, and I
Yeah.
remember buying and selling them for $9 all day long,
Wow.
and then when I was at Disney, some guy came in and he was like, Have you heard of the Bitcoin? I was like, yeah, like, what's going on? He's like, it's like $300. And I remember my mind exploding, thinking
Yes.
$300, man, I could have had like 20 grand
Well,
based on,
this is what I say when people are like, "Oh, I wish I had bought it when it was like $1." And my
right,
answer is, if I had bought it when it was $1, I would have sold it when it was $2.
right, right. No, I mean, so I've
I
got
just
another
wanna
friend that bought,
Yeah, when the money was doubled, I would have sold it.
we've got so many stories of these. I got a friend that got into Ethereum when it was like less than a penny and had, like thousands and thousands of shares of them. And when it got to like 30 cents, I think he was like,
Yeah,
he couldn't ride it anymore and sold
of
it all
course.
and made a decent amount. But now you like
Yes,
look at it and it's like $1,500 a piece. And
yes,
the guy at Disney was telling us, yeah, it's at 300. I was like, how many do you have? And at the point time, he had like 600 shares, right? I was like, why don't you sell it right now? And he's like,
yeah,
sell? I'm still buying it. Like all the money that I'm
yes,
making, I'm putting it into this, and I didn't get it.
because for me, there'd be no way to value it unless you knew, unless you had confidence that it was going somewhere because you understood something that like I at the time could not understand. But even then, anytime, I'm old enough to have seen economic booms and busts and like bubbles and tulips and whatever,
Yeah.
where it's the greater fool theory at a certain point. Like I've seen that happen where it's like, I'm buying this because it's hot. And I think they do that like with sports teams sometimes. Like it's not worth it. Like you can't ever get an NPV that says this team is worth $2 billion, but the prestige, the cachet, and like, what can really give a billionaire that kind of, uh, you know, high profile or whatever. But again, you can't really value that. So when things start going backwards, those things just pop. And I just, if you can't value it, I can't deal with it. But
Maybe, although kind of like you were saying earlier too, getting on board just because that's what like the New World Order wants. So if they've got all of
Right,
their
that would have been
machinations
smart. That's what I'm
behind it,
saying. I should have realized, like, they get what they want. Like, what's wrong? Whatever. Yeah, it's a penny. Okay, I'll take some.
it's like YouTube drops a new feature. It's like you might as well use it because they've got a room full of people that are paid a lot of money to like promote that and push it. So it's
Yes.
weird how it works. And just for a further dystopian future version of this isn't a prophecy. This is just like one consideration, but eventually, let's say that someone's buying like over half of their stuff on Amazon. Now, if you just had a way to give Amazon some value directly without being an employee and without giving them currency, then you could almost have this whole sort of company store gig going on. And in the very near future, there might be a position that humans are in where we don't really provide value outside of whatever, like very menial tasks because AI and robotics and everything. But what we might have is like a computer so that maybe like when you're not using it, or if your computer's like got more power than you need, it just kind of like ships it off to Amazon and they let people rent it out. And but then you've got this like little micro economy where it's I earn Amazon dollars and I spend Amazon dollars for a complete exchange of goods. And it kind of sounds cool, like this libertarian aggregist sort of like, hey, I'll give you these shoes and you give me this, but it's happening at the global, conglomerate level of Amazon, and it's happening under the nose of but outside the purview of the government. Maybe like I think that once all of these corporations and people in general are all kind of like on the same page, it's going to get a little bit wild, because like do they even have to report that I let them rent my computer in exchange for like a pair of socks that I wanted on my wish list? Because you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they
there's a
might be
few
like, oh
things
no, it was an equal change of not even goods.
that make me think of what you're saying. One is that Facebook, I think, had a coin, right? And Facebook have currency briefly. And then Bill Gates has a patent for a coin generated by your like ergs or whatever, your work on a computer, like your keystrokes will generate. I never really I that makes no sense to me. Like, is that unless what your keystrokes are doing is like a captcha where that you're translating a book, like, they say that captcha sometimes is digitizing a
Oh, not
book.
just that, but now when it's like click on the pictures of like a bus,
Yeah,
a
what's
lot
that
of
all about?
those so a lot of those
Oh,
aren't
it's
even
teaching AI.
buses. Yeah, those were AI generated buses that it was like, I'm 80% sure this is a bus, and it can
Right.
just confirm that from people giving it input. Yeah,
Yeah,
same
that's
thing as the
super cool
books.
and horrible. So, yeah, and here would be the problem with your scenario is that since Amazon is the only provider of goods, let's say, because I do basically buy everything on Amazon, and eventually that would mean that it was the only buyer of labor. And that's the problem, is that you then eliminate all surplus captured by labor, which is annoying to me. As a libertarian, I really hate that, because it sounds like labor theory of value. It sounds like Marxism. It fucking blows my mind, but it's uncool for labor to get nothing. Like, it's that same thing from World Economic Forum. Like, I own nothing and I'm happy.
And you eat
And it's you
bugs,
can just
yeah.
like Social Security is like that, and all these, not having anything, the progressive tax rate, it's all designed so that you don't have any surplus access to surplus at all. And I almost feel like if you spent it all, kind of getting back to the Ezra Pound thing, they would pay you more. Like, they just don't want you to have surplus. So because it gives you independence, and there is no surplus if it's simply ergs for goods. I mean, it would have to be like hyper durable goods. Like Amazon would have to sell gold, which it doesn't. And how else would you buy gold? Like, they don't mind, I feel like, if you like, that's a big thing with these people, that or even the Marxist thing, like, it's okay to have private property if it's like personal property, but nothing of any like real property, like real estate. If you look at, it's called Habitat or Habitat 1 from the UN. The basic premise is that property, like real property, should not be owned by individuals. You can own other things. You can own cars and the clothes on your back, which basically everybody says you can do. So your theory I think, is totally consistent with the big picture goal.
Is it a bad thing?
You know, There's something in my imagery of that that makes me feel like I would turn into a like, I feel like my hand like a Twilight Zone, my hands would grow into the computer, and my body would not be able to move anymore, you know what I mean? Like, it almost feels like you would become transhuman, just like the way people, like, if they don't turn you over in a nursing home, like, your skin grows onto the sheets. Do you ever hear that? Like, they have to peel the sheets off?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, funny story, when I was at Disney too, we did the training videos on those beds. They're Hillrom beds, and they've got these, like, built-in motors now, so for that exact reason, so that overnight, it'll just kinda automatically shift somebody, like, gradually and around, so they don't get those bed sores from
And
just
they
sitting
don't
in one place.
which goes to your other point, which is there will be no work for us to do.
Yeah,
There'll
that's
be
what a nurse, because usually that would be a nurse in the middle of
yeah,
the
human
night that would
beings.
like, "Excuse me, sir, please roll over to have some water," but now the bed just does it, and the bed can
And
detect it, and the bed can do it better and more efficiently than the
definitely.
human could.
Yeah, but just think about what happens when you stop having any human interaction. So when I grew up, I had 8 brothers and sisters and 2 parents and 1 TV with 3 channels. And we had 1 couch with 3 seats. So and I was the youngest, so I'd have to sit on the floor, whatever. And you'd have to agree on what to watch. You'd have to be quiet at commercials. People would like get up and get stuff for each other. If you had to run to the bathroom, but you had a seat on the couch, you had to say reserve place. And so you had a lot of, even though people really criticize TV, which I understand, it was a very community oriented activity in our house. And then even when I had kids, before they got computers and phones, we had cable, but we all sat around. We had to watch the same thing. And one of the things was like Ghost Adventures and all that, like the paranormal stuff was something that all the kids would watch, and I would want to watch too. So like we had to agree on stuff, and we would talk to each other, and we would like pause it and be like, "What do you think about that?" or whatever. And then they got phones and computers, and we not only like don't talk to each other, but you can get further and further into your own little world of what you like your own little quirky weirdness. And that kind of calls to mind an article I read on Quartz, which is like a internet magazine, I don't know what it's all about, but like there was a whitewashy story about the NSA's background on Google, like their contribution to creating Google. And one of the things they wanted to do was create what they called birds of a feather around you. But ultimately, I don't know if I read into this or if they actually stated it, that in your little group of birds, you might be the only real actual human. And if you know anything about crowds and power and people and their morality, their behavior in a group versus individually, peer pressure is almost irresistible. Like, that's how malleable our morals are in a
Right.
group.
Gustave Le Bon wrote that book in the
Exactly.
1890s, right? The Crowd, and he argues that
Yes.
once you get enough people together, the crowd actually becomes like a super organism, and the individuals sort of cease to have their own consciousness while they're in that crowd. And unfortunately, the crowd is only as smart as the dumbest person in it. Or I guess more
Right.
eloquently, it can
Yeah,
only
no, that's good.
reason
That
to
was a
the
good
capacity of like the person with the lowest, amount of capacity to reason.
Elias Canetti, who's actually German, sounds Italian, but he wrote in German, wrote a book called Crowds and Power, which is so poorly translated. I really could never slog through it, but it's supposed to be like a higher level analysis of that. And someone just suggested, and I took the suggestion that I read The Undiscovered Self, I think it is, by Jung, who
Yeah, Carl Jung.
Courtney Turner, yeah, was just telling me that he was like a double agent. Like he was literally deep state intel for like 2 different countries. So
I think that anyone that understood the human brain in the early 19th century, or the early,
yeah.
late 19th, early 20th century, you kind of had to be an intelligence because they would seek you out.
Like
And
AI
why
right
wouldn't
now.
you?
I've heard freaky stories of people who are doing research on AI getting absorbed, like getting hounded by the government
Well, the
for their
CIA has
research.
their own VC firm, you know, they
Oh,
scoop
I
stuff
know,
up. I
in
think
tell.
like the Xbox when they first, or the whatever video game console was that came out that had like the eye, like the PlayStation Eye or the Xbox thing where you could move around. I think it was called the Kinect. And that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
actually something that came from CIA VC backed funding,
Oh
and it
my
just made
gosh.
its way. I
Yeah.
think it started out for like dental purposes. It was weird, like a dentist created it. It's got a weird backstory. But yeah, that's a CIA funded project that is used for all sorts of technology, not just games, but here we are.
Yeah, well, they say, like, never use VR, like, never put that on, but I just feel like once people get super, super isolated like that, once my hands grow onto my keyboard so that I can get Amazon stuff, like, you're no longer a human being because all of your interaction is with non-human people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point, although devil's advocate a little bit on this. Like, here's the reason Skynet might be a good thing, because you were describing, and I just say that a little bit jokingly, but you were describing that community experience with your brothers and sisters, and you got to fight for the couch, and it turns into an actual social community thing. But that puts a lot of onus on just geographic convenience. Like, just the fact that you've got a bunch of people around you makes it really easy to make that into a social thing. But the second someone's just on their phone, like, they might now be in a social setting that's just not bound by geographic convenience. Like, why should I be
Yeah.
limited to talk about conspiracy comic books and video games with only the people in my city when, like, my city's not known for that?
I have to say right now, and I tested it out, so I'm positive that my birds of a feather are human. What I do, so I was just noticing, I was just saying this because my kids are both in college now, and it's hard to, like, whatever. Institutional socializing is not my thing at all. So I completely sympathize with the challenges that they're facing. And I was thinking, like, I was never good at that. Like, I can't just, no matter how drunk I got, I could not just fucking twerk. Never doing that. I'm never doing maybe Coke.
Well, now they got
M
TikTok videos that can teach you.
Yeah, I can't do it. I will be slurring, and it'll be like, "They're totally undermining the family." Like, I'm never getting that stupid, and, I was never good at that, and I don't have a ton of friends. Like, I have a few good friends over the years. I make one at, one work, one at another, and have a lot of brothers and sisters, so it wasn't that big deal. But ever since I did the propaganda report, which was like the show I did with Binkley, like every single day, the drive time news blast during lockdown. That was basically the entire time of lockdown. We made so many connections, and I did meetups and stuff, and people made connections with each other, started podcasts together, became really good friends. Like, I have people from, like, New England to Washington State who became friends through my show. And I would take one of my sons, just loves homesteading and farms and everything, any experience you want. Like, he went on my brother's truck, like, he'll just do anything. So I took him to a permaculture place in New York. I took him to our friends in Washington, Oregon, but all people I met from my show. Like, that's it. And I even now I live in LA. I have like 6 or 8 friends. They're all people I met at the meetups for the show. And I realized, like, I mean, these are like 20 people in this gigantic country of 350 million. And I never, ever would have found them. Tinder couldn't do a better job. Like, I couldn't never swipe left 100 million people, like, to find the one. And it's been great. And I have to just slip in here this crazy thing that one time I was saying on the air, like, that this chick was walking in front of my house with an impeach Gavin Newsom shirt on. She and Binkley posted it that night, like, we posted it as soon as we did it. She tweeted me the next day, and she was like, "Did you move to California?" And she's one of my best friends out here. What is the
That's
likelihood of
hilarious.
that? I mean, that's like, I was like, that's kind of
100%.
like 1,000,000,000 to 1. Like, what? How could that be? You know what I mean? Like, either I have like 100 times as many listeners as they let me know about, or like synchro is, we're getting shit's getting interdimensional, you know? But you're
Yeah.
right. I mean, it's great, and for as long as it lasts, so I just highlight. So that's part of why I think they're going to uh, kind of reel in air travel. Like air travel, super super safe. Like they've been wanting us to move around, and in order to verify these people, you got to get on a plane or drive really far, get on a train. So if you want to verify that your birds of a feather are real human beings, you have to check it out once in a while. You got to just
Well, that's
physically be in the
just
room.
if they're human beings. That's one level of it. But I mean, when you started mentioning the birds of the feather, my mind went to like PatCon or like Elohim City, and I'm not sure how versed you are on like Oklahoma
No,
and McVeigh
I
and all
was
this, but
just just yesterday took out of that slot and put in my on my nightstand the aberration in the
oh
real
my God, you're in for a treat. That
uh
book rocked my yeah. The
recommended by
aberrations in
Adam.
the heartland of the real. Yeah.
Yes, of Adam of Deborah Gets Red Pilled, whom I visited in Oregon, and he told me read that book, so I'm going to. But yeah, so
Highly recommend. That's so talk about synchronicities, but as you read that one, it spells out the best example of PatCon and all. She's got a lot of the receipts in that book, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Except those are real people. But what would happen is that in like Elohim City is this extremist place where they ship in a German guy that's got like German credentials, and he's going to run this and teach everyone how to do extremist stuff. But there's a note that
Andreas
someone
Staldmeyer or something.
what and it had people that were underground from the Southern Poverty Law Center were there, FBI, CIA, like just any sort of ATF, any three-letter agency, it was out there. Probably had one or two people to where the book paraphrasingly makes a joke like there might have been more alphabet agencies there than actual extremists. But what
Yeah.
happens there, because now the alphabet agencies aren't coordinated, this is in the 80s and 90s, so they're not necessarily sharing notes, and they're trying to like constantly one up each other. It's like, hey, you want to go and do this? And someone's like, yeah, but we should do this too. Like, oh, well, maybe
Oh,
we should do this.
no
And they're
way.
going back and they're reporting to their headquarters, and they're like, it's about to pop off. They're talking about doing this stuff, but really, they might have just been egging each other on and then pulling in the occasional
Right.
civilian that gets wrapped up in it. McVeigh, I wouldn't even consider as that civilian because he had, he
Oh,
might have
you
been
know the
sheep
letter to the New
dipped
York
and
Times. The
what's
letter that
that?
the New York he wrote a letter to his sister that was published in the New York Times. Have you ever read
That
it?
that talked about him being, like sheep dipped and
Pulled out
working for
of
the
basic training to
Yep.
do a domestic psyop. Basically, it was like, how do you how do you how do you gloss over that? You know what I mean? Like, how do you gloss over when someone says they think JFK was an inside job? I'm like, how does your entire view of this country not completely fall apart after that? Like, how do
Yeah.
you hold those ideas in your head? Or like 9/11, some people think 9/11 is, and they don't think that absolutely everything after that is just fake. I mean, people are dying, but they're just,
I mean,
so
yeah, the
yes.
building still fell. I get depending on what theory you're into, I guess. It might have just been a
What,
hologram or
what I, the 9/11 thing, like, I just, what I can't, the stumbling block people have, it's like that Dick Cheney would never do that, like whatever. They would never do that, never do that. I'm like, somebody did it. Somebody did. And what you're saying is that you think that these 15 Saudis did it, but Saudi Arabia had nothing to do with it. You know what I'm saying? It's just, it's so obvious that they just think that this group of people are uh subhuman and could do it. Like, I just think that's like what
Well,
one conservative commentator said, that they're like brutish and short. What's that famous? There's a famous quote about like the world, everybody but us, or outside of the borders of this country, like people are like Russians or whatever, not human. It's fucked up.
it's gonna get even easier because now they're gonna be able to stage things using AI and just be like, oh, it was the software got bugged or hackers got in. It might have been those Russian hackers again, and you don't even have to put a face or a name on it. you could just say Russian hackers, Chinese hackers, and people be like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. The plane took a little
But
dip and a twist.
but they could, like your intro, like you could take anybody and make them say anything
So
without, like
where are you at
right.
on 9/11? What's your theory? Because there's like the government didn't know about it and didn't
Oh,
prevent it. There's they
pish
knew about it
posh,
and
no.
prevented it. There's they
Dick
did
Cheney
it
definitely
and
knew about it. Dick Cheney Dick Cheney wasn't,
so do you think it would like the government orchestrated it as well,
yes,
or
I
do you
think it
think
was
that they like
100%
facilitated it?
the PNAC thing. They needed a new Pearl Harbor, and they got it. Pearl
Mhm.
Harbor was Pearl Harbor was an inside job,
Right,
so they
that's
got it.
another theory that Eisenhower knew that it was gonna be targeted and just kinda let it
Roosevelt.
happen so that we had a Roosevelt, so that we could have a justification for entering the war since we were kinda playing it Swiss for the first bit there.
Yeah, he was playing solitaire, and somebody came in like, "Hey, we just got intel that, like, the Japanese are gonna blow up Pearl Harbor. We better get those people out of there." And he's like, "Yeah, I'll read it later." I have a book called Backdoor to War, which is still in print, and it's 100% based on State Department documents that prove it, but it was published by some press, like Regnery Press or like some press that then I read somewhere else is like it was a CIA front. And I'm like, what level? You know what I mean? They've been pitting us against each other with truth since the 50s. So my father was in the Navy during World War II. Like he was like probably the youngest person who served there, and he only served for the last year, but he's in the Pacific. And when he got out in the 50s, I have his copy of Backdoor to War with his like notation. So he was only in his 20s when his eyes were open. Then he he was like led by the Pied Piper thing with William F. Buckley. Like then my parents worked for William F. Buckley, just volunteered at National Review for probably a decade or something until my father figured out William F. Buckley was like full of it. He was a CIA agent too, but like I just think the the whole conspiracy thing too, like it's obvious it's true, and I'm like, but here we are talking about it, and there's like literally 1,000 podcasters talking about this, and lots of people are listening to it. How is
Somebody
that
do something.
happening? Yeah, but how is that happening? How is that being allowed?
What, do you have any thoughts or, like, speaking points on Lyndon LaRouche? It's a name that goes under the radar
I
so
know.
often.
I have found
Why does he
some.
not get any credit anymore? Like, no
I
one even
know.
talks about him.
Was he an inside job? Like, I think he went to jail and stuff. He was see, this is another problem I have. So yeah, his work on the clash of civilizations, which I think is actually starting to bubble up. Like I had this idea of what the 20th century dialectic was. And now I had this theory about the 21st century dialectic, but it didn't seem to be taking off. But now I realize that it is, but I think he exposed, I think was it Bernard Lewis and Samuel Huntington? I have that. They wrote books called Clash of Civilization, which was exactly what's happening now, I think, where they want to take like Christianity versus Islam, and that's the thesis and the antithesis. And then the synthesis is like a highly restrictive secular religion that's universal and in its way is a combination of church and state, but it's a kind of godless or a neuter god, like universal God. Anyway, that's just my
Yeah,
theory of
we're
what's
talking,
happening.
Hegelian dialectic here now, getting
Yes,
into
yes,
Austrian philosophy.
yes. That's probably going too far, but yeah, but Lyndon LaRouche gave a little bit of a heads up because I was really trying to figure out what was going on. But here's another thing with a lot of these anti-imperialists, let's say, a lot of times they're communists. Like, I don't understand why you can't be anti-colonialist and anti-imperialist and not be a Marxist.
Well, he
There's
started there. LaRouche started as a Marxist, right?
yeah.
And then he
Didn't he end there
turned
too?
into like a right winger at a certain
Oh, did
point.
he?
Yeah, he flopped completely.
Oh, and you think
Yeah,
he
he's
was a legit guy?
I have no idea. It's wild that he is a crazy rabbit hole because like when we gets into like the woo woo topics of like 440 hertz versus 432. Are you familiar with this at all?
No, not at all.
So if you go on YouTube, there's all these people that will take like their favorite songs and then they'll retune it down because the theory is that, they, like the great they out
Yep.
there have purposefully entrained our brains to kind of tune to as 440 hertz, but that is irregular. It's not as natural as 432 hertz. And usually people use something called cymatics to back this up, where you put water or sand on a bass speaker, and when the frequencies kind of resonate, 432 and other denominations that are divisible by, I think, by 16, they all have these like nice kind of gestalt symmetrical patterns, whereas 440 is kind of like an aberrant mess of just frequencies. But this is actually kind of a true thing. And Lyndon, and this gets into woo-woo stuff, or like people that are really into crystals and frequencies and channeling things tend to really put a lot of investment in this 432 versus 440. And also Lyndon LaRouche, he also was a huge component of it. In fact, he started this global objective to get opera singers in particular, and they all protested. They all wanted to push for 432 again as the international standard. There was actually a huge debate in World War II, or leading up to it, between if the international standard was going to be 432 or 440, and it ended up going to the 440 range. And this was because it's more convenient to the instruments and the tuning, but it's less convenient for opera singers because it's more it causes more stress on the throat and the vocal cords.
Wow.
So the 440 actually is kind of like, it's easier for instruments, especially synthetic instruments, because a lot easier to tune a 440 and do all the math on 440 than 432, even though anyways, well, I don't want to go on
No,
a
that's
complete
really
tangent on
interesting.
this, but if you peel these layers back, it's like, and the person that came the closest to actually making a global push was Lyndon LaRouche, but no one ever brings that up because Lyndon LaRouche doesn't sit nicely into like that crystal prayer circle, because he's this weird guy that started as like a Leninist, and then he became a right winger, and then he wrote for, like everything to him was the Jesuit CIA was behind everything. Like he kind of went towards that at the end, I guess. But he also wrote a whole bunch of magazines and articles about like CIA inside operations. So
Yes.
he's a wild card, and I
Yeah.
am legitimately interested in why people don't talk about him.
I used to pull down his newsletters just because in my research, when I did more research, I don't know why I haven't even seen his name in a while, but he is he dead or what? He must be dead.
He's dead, and I think The Simpsons had like an episode where they made fun of him at one point, and that was it. And he's kind of like this person that got brushed under the carpet, but he was a conspiracy theorist with real political power versus, the guys that have radio shows and podcasts.
Right. Well, some time ago, while I had a radio show, my mother ran into somebody who was passing out flyers or literature who was from like the Lyndon LaRouche Society or something. I don't know if it was
Yeah.
while Lyndon LaRouche was still alive, but she told him about me and she's like, she has a radio show. You could be on her radio show. But the show was not interview oriented. Like that was really, that's not the show I had. I had a call, like my show was a caller based show. And that was the now, I had a few exceptions, but it was rare, and it was very clear from
Have
on
him call
high,
in
like
then.
what?
I
Let
just
him
have him
call in?
call in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He
So
could have. I just blew him off, but I always wondered about that. I wish I hadn't. And then the other is the John Birch thing. John Birch had some good stuff. They
it's
had
very connected. LaRouche and the John Birch
Yeah,
Society.
but
There's
then
a
they were
lot of
like bigoted and stuff. I don't really know the history, but I know people like run and scream with
the
John
book
Birch.
that you just were pointing out, the aberrations in the heartland of the real. I think
Yeah.
it gets a little bit into the John Birch and stuff, only because that's
Uh-huh.
kind of where they plucked from. That was the birds of the feather. It's like if you were an active member in John Birch, that might be a good place to go in and see what's going on in there. I think McVeigh, he kind of like sampled, right? He kind of sampled the different groups around him, and I don't want to say John Birch in particular, but that's kind of the
Yeah.
places they would pick out of.
And I'm sure they did it the other way too, where they put people in the John Birch Society that made it a more race-based thing. Because I think the early stuff was like constitutional stuff.
It's how a lot of it starts, and then again, that also might just be part of the crowd theory, right? It might not even be like the CIA has to come in and dirty the water. It might just be like the
I
crowd
think they
lowers
do.
the collective IQ, and
I think that identity politics and like traditional conservatism, like libertarianism, classical liberalism, like the Bill of Rights type stuff, are totally incompatible with each other and cannot lead to the other. So that's why I think they had to take. I understand that they can they can insert it like somebody inserted into Ron Paul's newsletter that there was going to be a race war, and like you insert it into these things and maybe predict it. And maybe just by saying, I think the CIA is working on a race war, it makes you sound like a racist. I don't know. But that's why I think they could not hijack the Ron Paul movement to bring identity politics to the right, which I think they had been trying to do for decades. They had to hijack that energy with Trump, but they had to gut the principles because their individualism is so antithetical to groupthink, to racism and stuff. I think they had to say, okay, it is us versus them, but let's fight fire with fire, like Trump wise. Don't you think, or is that you think that's not
I
no validity?
do. And honestly, I want to go on a whole tangent with you right now on a whole topic of like NLP and stuff. But I know that we have limited time here, and I've got a little segment that I want to play and just play us off on like a sort of a silly note. So we're just gonna run right into it. I'm gonna surprise you with it, but yeah, let's just do this.
Hey, conspiracy buffs, I double dare you to take some PCP, the Paranormal Conspiracy Probe. On your marks, get set, and go!
Okay, Monica, rules are very simple. I just want a 0 to 10 rating from you on how credible you think a certain thing is, right? 0 meaning like it's silly, it's for children, fairy tales, and then 10 being like pull up a chair, I'll convince you of this now, all right?
Okay, so 10 would be if you say
You
moon
find it
landing.
credible. Yeah,
I
10,
find it
10 is
so if
you
you say
find it the
moon
most
landing,
credible.
I'm gonna say 0, right? I don't think the
So
moon
let's
landing's
start there.
credible.
Let's start with
Ok
that human beings have stepped foot on the moon.
yes, no chance. That's a 0?
A full 0, yeah.
Right.
Dinosaurs existed.
I'm thinking 0.
Dragons existed.
Like fire-breathing dragons?
Yeah, fire breathing, flying dragons. I think fire is a key component, so they have to breathe fire. Or someone's asked me before, like, does acid count? Maybe, I guess. Like the
I'm thinking
but
there
then they
are,
have to
like,
fly
weird
too.
little lizards with wings and stuff, and maybe they have, like, acidy stuff coming out. I'll give you a 2. I'm not a
Okay.
huge dragon. I'm not saying there's a
Okay.
huge dragon, but
Bigfoot.
I think that as long as you've got a definition that's, kind of fluid, I'm gonna give you a 6.
Alien abductions. Like a UFO beams you up into the ship and they poke
Physically.
you and fit like a physical UFO abduction.
Does it is it does it count if I think maybe it's like a CIA front and they're doing it, but they're pretend like that I would like to say that people think they were abducted, and I would like to give them the credit of a 6, but I'm gonna say, is it alien? I'm gonna say 2.
What about the cattle mutilations being done by aliens and not CIA op, but like
Right.
actual extraterrestrials of some kind?
Gonna say 2.
What about aliens helping with the pyramids?
Does that include interdimensional beings?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Anything that's extra or interdimensional, I guess.
Okay, I'll give you a 4 on interdimensional.
Do you think chemtrails are real?
Like, they spray shit in the air and it changes the weather and all that? 10, definitely.
Do you think 0 to 10 on using chemtrails for mind control?
Like the way they use it for fluoride, like the way they use
Yeah,
fluoride
yeah.
for yeah, I think there's I'm gonna give that a 7. So when I give you a 0 or 10, it's because like I've actually researched it and come up with I concluded. So the minute I'm not trying to be wishy-washy with the other stuff, but I'm just guessing there. But if I'm giving you 0 or 10, it's like I'm done. I'm not even
I'll do a follow-up before we're completely done. And then the last one, it's kind of a combo one, so you can split it into 2 if you want, but Pizzagate slash frazzle drip slash spirit cooking. Is there something to it other than just like edgy, artsy, look at me energy?
jeez. I
But do you
it's
think
that's
anyone's
a tough
actually summoning demons or getting like supernatural powers or
yeah, it's 100% a psyop. But is it based like Pizzagate was there to do something, it was planned, but is there something to it? I'll give you a 4 that there's something to it, and then if you wanted to go bigger with the occult, I would say, there's a 6 that there's something to it. They definitely do it. There's a 10 that it gets done, but is it altering the universe or is it just a mind control technique? That's where,
Mhm.
10, it's happening. But do the people who are doing it believe it or are they laughing like behind their cloaks? I mean, I went to the
Right.
Grammys. Like I saw they did like they always have like a black mass ritual at the Grammys,
Oh,
basically.
was it like what was the black mass ritual at the
Okay, so
Grammys?
this time I was going up the escalator and I think it's Sam Smith. He was that a person? Is that a
I
artist?
don't
Sam
I
Smith?
live
I
in Maine.
believe he's the guy who, like, struggles with his weight or has complained about struggling with his weight. So, I see through the windows, like, there were trailers where people were getting ready, and I see him there in how, like, a priest or a whatever will wear, like, a black frock all the way down to his like, with a collar, but a black frock all the way down to his feet?
Mhm.
He was wearing that, not with the collar was missing, but it was red all the way down to his feet, and I said, "Oh, he's gonna probably do the satanic ritual." And people on the elevator, everybody's in their gowns and everything, they're just like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And it's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say that out loud. Never mind, never mind." And, yeah, he's there, he's on the stage, and then he's in the middle, and there's all these people in the red around him, and literally and of course, Madonna makes an entrance because she's usually in that one. Flames, real actual flames start shooting up behind him, just like, "Does anybody what do you think this is?" You know? And one time my kids, I go, like, just as a work thing, I get to go a fair amount, and one time, many years ago, I mean, I noticed this for a long time, I said to I would just I made that comment a lot of times, and one time I was on my way out, my kids were like, "Mom, tell us, take a picture of this satanic thing." So, whatever it is, I wonder what it's gonna be this year, and walked in, I was in a suite so I could oversee, like, all the people who sit. Every single solitary person was wearing glowing devil horns in the audience. I shit you not, and I was like, "Come on. This is ridiculous," and people laugh at me because out comes AC/DC and they sing Highway to Hell, and they're like, "Well, they were just," and I was like,
They're being
"They were
cute.
what?"
They were just being cute.
Yeah, but I mean, when you predict something and it happens over and over again, you might be wrong about the causation, but, like, that isn't that the scientific method? Theory predicts outcomes, and then I don't I don't know, but are they devil worshippers? I don't I'm like, I don't really think so. Like, I don't think so. Like, I think they're fucking with us.
Do you think there's objective evil just in the world itself? Like, could someone legitimately like summon a demon, or do you think that that's just another mental thing that you're doing?
I really struggle. So I'm a practicing Catholic. I
Mhm.
pray all the time. Like, I never, like, say the rosary and all that kind of stuff. I'm just like, "Please help me, please help me, please help me." And, like, he helps me all the time. I mean, it's undeniable. And I've had a few signs that I've asked for and gotten. So it's in my mind, there's definitely. I mean, I cannot. I cannot. It would be really foolhardy of me to deny the help that I've gotten because I'm really expecting a lot more help. Like I'm not. I've got a
I'm
lot of
not
years
done
ahead.
yet. Yeah.
Totally not jinxing that. But and then on the other hand, from 9/11, which was like the only explanation that I can think of for that kind of a horror. Like I think in their minds they drafted those people, like they just killed people for their military purposes, whatever. But it's just so outside our capacity as ethical human beings to do that. That like it looks like a black mass to me. And then COVID, the amount of destruction, the amount of death and suffering and disease that they spread with their COVID policies. I'm not even talking about whatever they fucking invented and shot in everybody's arms to shoot out people's faces and get me sick, which is exactly what I think happened. I think they spread it around with the vaccine, got us all sick by shooting people up with it, which was, whatever, spewing out their face holes. But even not including that actual thing, the COVID and the vaccine, how much death and disease, well, I guess the vaccine causes the disease, but like the cancers and stuff, like what they I mean, that hundreds of countries, went along with this, like so many individuals and so many, probably billions of people mindlessly doing something that was net evil. Like I don't know. Like, I feel like human beings are not that evil, or we wouldn't have built tall buildings that stand up. Like, that is objective truth. That is good. So, what is that? Where did that come from? Something sparked that. Something spread that evil into mankind, like these past couple of years. So, I'm going to say it's like a very, very long answer to your question, but I think, yeah, I think there's evil.
It could be the same thing. This could also be Dick Cheney.
Dick Cheney, yes, and I mean, what is living in him? You know what I mean? Like, what could so he has to connect with other. There has to be a force, right? He has to be connecting. It's all connecting with people. There has to be some like malevolent spirit, I think.
Yeah, imagine these guys walking around the halls and then just connecting with someone else. Like, you're like me, we should team up. And then what like they do, like what does that Gustave Le Bon group look like, right? Not when you're talking about the Bumpkins, but when you get like Mandalay Bay and
Yes.
Bohemian Grove or the Hillbillies together, like what does that
Well,
kind of group look like?
there was this crazy video that I've shared many times of a woman who said that her parents were in a secret society and she as a little girl had to run kids around in these human hunting parties, and that the guys who couldn't like get it up and rape little kids were basically eliminated from the group with prejudice, killed and whatever. And so like they promise power, they draw you in, and if you can pass these tests of depravity, you get to rise through the ranks of the power that it is theirs to give, like straight out of the Bible. Like, these are the kingdoms. I can give these to you.
When
Like,
this is just Epstein on steroids, right? Like the Epstein is
right.
the tame
At
version
least
where all
they're
you had to do was get
adolescent,
on a plane and go to a resort. Like the
Yes.
crazy part was just what happened at the resort that you paid for, but we're not
But
talking
those
about
are
going out into the woods and like hunting people down.
post-adolescent girls too. Like, a 17-year-old woman, I understand it's illegal, or 15-year-olds, whatever, but pre-pubescent children, like that's, I don't see how that could be actual lust. Like, that seems to me pure, hurtful, malevolent depravity. Yes, in the woods chasing people. So,
Well, what a way to wrap up this
sorry.
episode on
No,
such a
we have to
light
change
note.
that. Absolutely. No, I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope. I have hope for a couple of reasons. One, I think they did COVID in part to crash the economy so they could inflate and raise interest rates, which means to me that they're not ready to destroy our currency and our economy and everything yet. So that buys
It
us
sounds
time.
like some tarnished silver lining, but okay.
Yes, I also
They haven't killed us yet because they're not ready. They will, but
well, no, I
we've
don't
got
know.
some
Like,
time.
but it means that they aren't. The fact that they aren't doesn't means that they maybe can't. Maybe they don't have that much control. And I also think that I think that a lot of the hopelessness is just us, me right now, like saying that stuff, like convincing ourselves that there is, this organized superior power that can control humanity. And I think we're also seeing that there are billions of people who are still human and are not going to fall for that. And that's a problem for them. And I think that maybe those evil overlords who don't really believe in the soul or God, like they can't really believe in God because God would win, I assume, in the end. Like even Lucifer probably knows that he's outmatched in the end after the end of the world. That that good is, good is truth. Good is what makes buildings stand up, not fall down. What can they do? They can blow up buildings, but they can't, build them with their malevolence. So I feel like good is the stronger force, and just, play as if like this is just a test. Which side are you on?
I think that's well said. Although as a practicing Catholic, isn't there always that back door of like, if you just repent on your deathbed and really mean it, then it all goes away?
Doesn't all go away. You have to go to
No?
purgatory for a long time. I actually,
That's right.
like, I'm kind of
you gotta
okay with
earn it off.
purgatory. The celebration of purgatory is, I think, All Souls Day this week. But purgatory, you have to go and purge. You have to purge all your sins and baggage. You have to suffer. It's just like hell, except for it's not eternal. So you might be there for like a million years. You don't want to fuck up, and you might not get a deathbed. You might just, when they decide that airplanes aren't, they don't want you to think they're safe anymore, and you're on that one. No.
Yeah, that's true.
No,
That
not
you
the
can't like time out your Pascal's wager. Like you're either in it
No
or you're
way.
not. You can't leave it
No
for the
way.
last second.
And there's a tally book. Like his wager is complicated. There's definitely like and I'm not saying I can tell you what is tallied on your sides, but when you know what you're doing is wrong or you refuse to think about it, you're going to be held responsible for that. I do shit like that all the time. I do the wrong thing all the time. And unfortunately, I'm well aware of it. So I have to like feel bad. But I feel like being aware of it, maybe keeps you in line a little bit because purgatory is going to suck. But I think it'll be good because of all the things that you think of that you do, you can't take that baggage with you into the afterlife. So it gives you an opportunity to just atone. And I think you need that. I think we need that. And I think we can offer up our sacrifices and our suffering and not indulge in every consumer impulse. And, that's in the great tally board in the sky.
I think this was an interesting sort of jumping around, but man, we went from like Bitcoin to Bigfoot to dinosaurs to purgatory. So we left a lot on the table. I still want to talk to you about NLP at some point, even if you're not familiar with that, because I think it would apply in so many different things that you're bringing up.
Okay,
So aside from Monica's deepdives.com, where else can people find you again?
Just listen to Deep Dives with Monica Perez on your favorite podcasting platform, or go to rockfin.com/deep dives, where you can probably find everything on video without commercials. So Deep Dives has commercials because I have to pay a producer. But if you go to Rockfin, if you belong to Rockfin, and actually I think a lot of my stuff is free on Rockfin. So you can just sign up to rockfin.com/deep dives and not even have to pay.
And there you go. If you want some deep dives, and we all love deep dives, I have the utmost respect for like the long form research format. So thank you for doing it and showing people how it's done. And speaking of commercials, I'm going to play us out with one right now.
Frazzle Drip Funhouse. Enter, if you dare, the world of an animatronic bear whose metallic heart beats with a thirst for justice, a hunger for revenge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, connoisseurs of the macabre and seekers of the scandalous. Your voracious appetites for chilling narratives are about to be satiated by the heart-stopping, pulse-pounding creation of Paranoid American and Winged Sun comics. Abandoned in the dusty corners of amusement, now awoken in the murk of wickedness perpetrated by an evil elite. This is not your childhood fairy tale, but a macabre dance of vindication, soaked in crimson, a symphony of screams echoing in the dimly lit chambers of malevolence. Be prepared for an onslaught of ghastly gore and titillating terror. A wicked waltz through twisted hallways and blood-stained basements where only the brave dare to tread. Quake at the bear's unyielding pursuit, cackle at the sharp and sardonic one-liners, shudder at the graphic, gratuitous scenes that harken back to the glory days of B-horror flicks. Frazzle-Drip Funhouse is your ticket to a thrill ride of terror. A carnival of carnage where the laughs are as loud as the screams. Uncover the truth beneath the rust and the blood, and remember, nothing is as it seems. Are you ready to step into the Frazzle-Drip Funhouse, where the animatronic eyes are always watching, and vengeance is a game that everyone can play? Get your backer exclusive cover on Indiegogo. For more information, visit paranoidamerican.com.